Okay, so I'm going to do this video on my experience with this Wheeltop Groupset. It's their GEX, there you go, you can see it there. It's their 1x system, and I recently took this on a 6-week bikepacking trip in New Zealand. I rode approximately 1,600 miles. If you're familiar with the trip, it would be the tour at Derailleur. It runs from North to South Island. I rode the South Island portion of it in March of 2025. And I'm going to go through my experience with this Wheeltop and the issues I ran into with it. So here's the calipers that I initially had, and I'll just put these out of the way because when I did my warranty claim, they didn't really want these. What Wheeltop did is they sent me 2 new shifters. I kept the main derailleur mechanism, and I kept the hanger for the pulley wheels. I really wanted them to replace the whole unit, but they didn't want to do that, and they sent me 2 pulley wheels. First issue was the battery. Main thing is that if you fall over or you knock it or the bike falls over, this battery will tend to disconnect and you have to reseat the battery. That happened to me several times on the trip. Specifically when I arrived in New Zealand, when I got the bike from the airport back in the hotel, it took me quite a few tries to get the battery seated. And then there was another time where I fell on an embankment I'll get into on Big River, where I hit the embankment on the right side with the shifter and it disconnected the battery. I was like in the mud and I was on like a single track and it was kind of wet and the soil was dark and I was on an embankment. You know, you don't want to be like popping open this lid to reseat a battery. Luckily I was in a good gear because I was primarily going downhill. I had done most of the climbing for that day, so I didn't touch it. But let me just show you. So you open it, you go like this, and it's your standard coin battery. But one of the other things I find is it's kind of difficult, at least for, again, it could be me, to reinstall it. There was another time, it was almost a safety issue, where in New Zealand they have these one-way bridges. In other words, you have to wait till the other car clears the bridge, and some of them could be quite long. And I was in a situation where I had leaned the bike over to the side to go under a cable. So on that cable, I went under it. So I laid the bike horizontally and, you know, pulled it underneath the cable. So here I have a car behind me. The right shifter wasn't working, and I'm pedaling like a road runner, going barely anywhere. I had to pull over, reseat the battery. Couldn't really deal with it till I got off the bridge. Here I am like a hamster on a spinning wheels in their cages. You really got to push that battery down to get it to seat. Nope, I'm not going to spend too much time doing this. Let's move on. Tour at Derailleur is arguably more a bike touring ride. Well, I did a lot of highway riding on that, and there are some nice gravelly parts of it. But specifically the South Island that I rode, I can't speak to North Island. There was a section called Big River, and on that day several things went wrong. I was on my descent. I was probably only maybe 10 to 15 kilometers out of Ikamatua, and I fell over on the embankment. The battery got dislodged. Later on, then the brake stopped working, the right-handed brake, the rear brake stopped working, and I forget when it started working again. I don't know if it was that day or the next day, but the brake did come back. But the other big thing was that I heard a noise underneath the, on my chain, and I looked down, and what had happened was the upper pulley wheel had fallen out, and I only had the rear one, and I could see that the thread had stripped out and the bolt was gone. On a side note, I do want to mention something that's not really related to Wheeltop specifically, was I made the mistake of pulling the derailleur, and I wouldn't recommend doing that. I just thought when your derailleur isn't working, you should pull it off and make the bike a fixie. And the problem with that is unless you have the exact length on the chain will tend to, with the slop on the bottom of the chain that's dangling, it'll have a tendency to jump up onto a cassette. And in my case, it was jumping up to the larger cassette. And what happened was it bound the whole drivetrain to a point where I couldn't even pedal. The crank wouldn't move at all. And I had to literally like unbolt the chain ring. It was on so tight that when I hit it, tapped it like this to get it to pop off, it literally bent the bolts that are in here now. I can't screw the screw in there. In hindsight, I should have just left the derailleur on, and that's what I did the next day. So the next day I put the derailleur back on without the top pulley, and I hobbled into Greymouth and Tracy at Man Cycles, put these Shimano wheels on here that you see, and put a nut and bolt on here to secure the pulley wheel. I did request a replacement from Wheeltop, but they declined. They just said, you know, they weren't going to replace the arm, which I really don't agree with, because I don't remember hitting anything, nor do I think there's any damage to this derailleur that I can see. There is some wear from when the chain, because as you look, these pulley wheels from Shimano are smaller, even though they have the same amount of teeth. They are smaller, and that was chain rub because the chain was so much closer to the hanger, and I think this is when it would shift, it would rub here. But in terms of impact, there is no impact damage on this derailleur, so I think that was a mechanical failure on their part with this. I decided that once I get to Queenstown, I'm going to have the brakes bled professionally, so it takes me out of the equation, because I bled these. They came pre-filled with mineral oil. It's a Shimano system, but I thought maybe I did something wrong and I don't want the brake to fail again. So if you're familiar with the TA, you have to take a boat and cross the lake to continue the journey once you leave Queenstown. Now, once I got off the boat, I realized that my front brake wasn't working, and what had happened was the mineral oil was seeping out of this top bleed port. I haven't gone very far, and I've just deduced that my front caliper is leaking fluid, and basically has leaked fluid all over the brake pad and the disc, and I no longer have a front brake. It looks like there's a shop in Alexandra, but unfortunately I have two big descents coming up. Again, that wasn't a Wheeltop issue, but I bring this up because the bike shop kind of had an attitude. Once I called them about it, they were like, oh no, this isn't our problem. This isn't, our mechanics don't make these kind of mistakes. It's, you know, it's this Chinese stuff. It's not SRAM or Shimano. We don't have that problem. So I bring that up because you might get some attitude from some mechanics. I mean, one of the mechanics was like, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of these. There's, you know, they are getting used to seeing the Chinese ones. So what I did is I rode to Alexandra, which was, I think, maybe 2 days away, and I had to do this decline called Duffer Saddle with no front brake, which was kind of sketchy because kind of a challenge, even with brakes, but to do it with only one brake was kind of a little unnerving, to say the least. So anyway, when I got to Alexander, they realized that this O-ring that's on here was destroyed when they reinstalled it in Queenstown. Then I got to Mossburn, and I switched to the Sound the Sounds route. Now, the Sound the Sounds is what I would consider more of a bikepacking route, and I headed north on that, and there's a section where you have to cross, one day you cross like 33 fjords. There's 33 water crossings on this part of the trip. So on my second water crossing, I fell over. Oh, shit. And the right shifter went in the water for a second or two, pulled it up and continued to ride. And then later in the day, it stopped working. Or I would push it and nothing would happen, and then I would push it again and then it would shift, get it in the gear, it would work, try and shift the gear, it wouldn't work. So then I tried the app, and the app does work. One thing I will say about the app though, I could only get it to work if I had cell service. If I didn't have cell service, it would give me a network error. Okay, I'm in the middle of editing a video, and I just wanted to go back and double check that you cannot in fact connect to the derailleur via the app when you don't have cell service. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap the Bluetooth button here at the upper right, which is how you connect. And normally I'll get an error code, but what happened now is the derailleur is asleep because it hasn't been used for a little while. So I'm going to try and connect with the paddles. So I've woken up the derailleur, and we're going to try and connect via Bluetooth. And network is busy, please try again later. Now at this point you could hit cancel. If you wait, you should get another error code saying that it couldn't connect basically, but I've been just hitting cancel to continue. If you wait long enough, you'll get this error here, connection timed out. So when I got that first error code, that's where I stopped. I thought, okay, it isn't working. Normally when you connect with an internet connection, you'll get a battery level indicator. Why you need cell service for that, I don't know. But you'll also get an indicator of where the coin batteries are. Usually they're like at 3 volts or 2.9 or something like that. So at that point I stopped when I got that error message. I thought, okay, it doesn't work. I was stressed, obviously. I was raining, you know, I just wanted to get through the day. So I just assumed that it didn't work. But if you tap the Bluetooth icon up there, you'll get this error, network is busy, try again. That's where we started. So if I hit cancel, and it looks like it's connected because the Bluetooth is still illuminated. So if you ignore that message and then go down to the cog at the bottom here, tap that, and then go to device adjustment, change gears, and you'll get another error message. Code 404, error domain equal con. So it doesn't know where it is on the cassette, but if you tap this, you can control it through the app. And it does work without cell service. You just have to ignore the errors. So I was able to use the app for a little bit on that day, but the other problem is it times out from my experience. In other words, if your phone shuts down to save battery or your screen goes dark, you know, I had to reconnect the app, or if it goes on for a few minutes, it just disconnects, and that was kind of a problem. So I kind of got through that day, and it eventually started working, but it did continue to have problems on and off, especially when it rained. it would just act up and not shift properly. So on that same day where I fell into the water, this right brake stopped working completely. It didn't come back. This is after it was bled professionally. And again, I had another pass to come down. I think I went down McKenzie Pass with only the front brake. And needless to say, I was a little nervous that in case the front brake failed. I rode that for a couple days, and then I got to a town called Twizel. A lot of these towns are like tourist areas where they have bike rentals. The bike shops are more rental facilities, but they have bike shops because they have so many bikes. Twizel. Just left the bike shop, fixed my brakes, or at least refilled it, did a quick bleed on it, just poured oil in from the top, and it took a lot. And yeah, I don't know where the oil went. I'm concerned there's a leak, but definitely recommend Cycling Journey. They serviced my bike. Gentleman was really cool, took it right away. But there's the bleed port for the shifter. I couldn't see what he was doing, but it looked like he was putting a lot of oil in. And then he just pumped the handbrake and it started working. I thought he would have to bleed it, and I was concerned it was going to fail again, but it actually lasted until my last day of riding. On this Wheeltop system, they give you the left side, at least for the United States, the front brake. They give you this paddle that can go one way. It goes either up the cassette or down the cassette. And like I said earlier, I had disconnected it because I prefer just concentrating on the one, like this is my Apex, which just has one paddle on the right. So what I did is I engaged the battery for this, and I made this go up the cassette. So anytime I had a problem with this guy riding along, I would simply use this one to go up the cassette. When this one acted up, it generally would go the wrong way on the cassette. It would only go down the cassette. Obviously that's a problem when you're climbing a hill, because if you need to immediately go up a gear, you hit this button and you got to go down the gear. Like I have to go down like 8 cogs and then come back 9 to get into the gear I want to get into. Now several days later, I think I was riding into wherever the canal is on the Sounds, the canal road. There's a stanchion I had to go through and I had to tip the bike up vertically. This is the point where no more cars can go through. I just lifted the bike, on its rear wheel, pulled back and rolled it through on its rear wheel, and I noticed a bunch of water came out of the derailleur from yesterday, which is kind of odd that it retains water. Not a good thing for it to do. It is functioning okay. I did notice that the pulley wheels that were put on in Greymouth, I don't think they're perfect. The derailleur, it's been functioning fine today. Yesterday morning when I started out, it was doing the reverse. It was supposed to be going up, it was going down, it was supposed to be going down, it was supposed to be going up, and then it stopped working. Wait a few minutes, wait a few seconds, and then try it again, and it would function. That was a few days later, and it wasn't raining. I know it wasn't raining. It was a beautiful day that day when that happened, but somewhere in there, this derailleur stored water. But the last thing that happened was my last day of riding on the Queen Charlotte track, which is pretty gnarly. This brake died again and came back. So that is even after it was bled professionally, it still had issues. And then last but not least was when I flew home, when I pulled the bike out of the box, the front brake did not work at all and it didn't come back. So basically the system was inoperable as far as I was concerned, because I couldn't ride without a front brake. I didn't really try to bleed it because I thought I'm just going to go back and send it in and get a replacement. One other thing, this is my spare derailleur hanger, and might be an issue with my bike specifically because it's kind of a chunky hanger. When I take off my rear wheel, it hits this and it's kind of restricted. This really should be a little not so chunky, this part of the derailleur. And so I actually filed down on the one on my bike, the corner a little bit, so I can swing the derailleur out of the way. I can get my rear wheel off, but it's really, really tight fit in that situation. And the other thing is this tongue. This is the B screw. This tongue isn't very long, and if you go to adjust it, and you have this on the bike, and I guess maybe if you're in the, in the highest gear on the cassette, and this will go past. If you unscrew the B screw too much while you're trying to adjust it, it will go past this little tongue or whatever, this limiter. And I did that, and I don't know if you can see it. You can see where it's actually worn. This part here is, this little part here is where the bolt, actually when I was adjusting it under pressure, it just slipped through there. And just something to be aware of, that you don't want to take out the B screw too much. I think what I might have to do is flip the B screw around and use the head on that end and just use pliers to adjust the B-screw whenever I need to do it. So that's kind of everything that happened in New Zealand. With regards to their warranty service, I contacted them during the trip and they said, no problem, we'll talk to us when you get back, we'll take care of everything for you. When I got back, I reached out to them. The way it works is you email them, I'm in Southern California, and then like 24 hours later, I would get an email back with a response. So there was a little back and forth, and obviously this is a little hard to explain, so I shot a video, explained everything. They said send back the shifters and we'll send you new ones, and that's what these are. And I said, well, I really feel that this derailleur hanger should be replaced, and I explained to them what happened, but they were like, no, we're not going to replace the derailleur hanger. I said, well, can I have some pulley wheels? And they're like, yeah, we'll send you the pulley wheels. So, but then they were like, well, we don't have our online store until June, so we can't really send you the pulley wheels, but send in the shifters. But so I wanted to wait. So in June, I sent my initial units back, and these came with these two pulley wheels. And it took about 2 to 3 weeks for them to send this back. I thought once I sent mine, because I only sent it to a warehouse in Southern California, it was only like, it was in Fontana, which is like 50 miles away from me. And I thought maybe initially they would, drop ship it immediately, but no, it still took like 2 to 3 weeks, and it came from China, the replacement part. And just before I shot this video, I just realized I don't have the dust caps for these. I'm almost positive these pulleys, these jockey wheels need dust caps. So I just reached out to them today. It's mid-July at this point, and said, don't I need dust caps? So we'll see what they say. And they're very responsive. It's just that it's a very slow process. I went back to my Apex in the meantime, and I think for my bikepacking trips, I'm not going to... I have enough experience to know that this was a bad idea. I kind of knew it anyway and did it. I'll probably put these back on my bike, but only use them for some local rides or some short overnighters, 2 to 3 days, if that, in Southern California where there's no rain. But that's my experience with the GeX. There is customer service, but it's very slow. And I guess just don't get your system wet. Maybe they've changed it and updated it with seals or something. It's not something I would recommend riding in the rain with. Let me try and get this battery back in, this cap. Yeah, see, you really got to push that in. We got to make sure that's seated there. And then there's an arrow there. We'll try and get this guy to sit flush. Nope. Oh, that feels good. Yeah, there you go. You can kind of feel it settle into the... There's 3 fingers here. Yeah, there's, it's a tri-connection. So you really got to make sure that those 3 fingers slot into those spots there. And there's an arrow to line up. I think if you do that, but again, I wouldn't want to do this on trail. Yeah, you can get that flush with the battery, and then, see, I don't want to be able to see that finger there. Yeah, it feels good there, yep. Nope. There we go, there you go, I got it. Okay, cool.